Hi, my name is Borys, and in this video I'm going to give you an introduction to Ableton's most powerful equalizer, the EQ8. It's an essential effect to master for any music producer. After explaining all the basic features, we will dive into different use cases and also explore some awesome hidden functions. Before we get into the video, if you like what we are doing on this channel, make sure to subscribe. We've got a lot more content about Ableton coming up. If you'd like to learn Ableton 12 with all the foundations of music production, check out our Beginner to Advanced Live 12 Start to Finish course. And make sure to also check out the Everything Bundle Collector's Edition, which includes all of the courses, sound packs, and project files in our store. To see all of that, check the video description. Alright, so let's jump in. Here's our Ableton project. We just have an audio track. Onto this audio track I've put a quick loop from one of our templates included in the Beginner to Advanced course. Let's just hear it first. Very simple loop. We just have some synths going on, also just a stable kick drum. So from audio effects, you can drag in the EQ8. You just open up audio effects, take a look at EQ8, open up this MIDI track and drag it right here. So if you'd like to make this display a bit bigger, and I'm gonna do that, you just click this arrow and you'll be able to clearly see everything that's going on. And these are all the frequencies that we're gonna be working with today. Let me just give you a quick introduction to why we use EQs so much in music production. Essentially, we're just using it to cut or boost different frequencies and to have the tonal balance of all of our tracks correct. We can make easily stuff brighter, make things sound smoother, and maybe we can cut out some frequencies that we don't like, or we can boost frequencies that we want to cut through more. Many different things can be done with EQ. Even if you're completely new to music production, you probably know what an equalizer does. You might have that on your computer or maybe in your car. Whenever you want to boost the bass or maybe cut the bass, you might have a control for that. Here's what an EQ might look like on your computer or in your car. You basically have different bands. So these are these dots right here that I'm setting up. So I just set up 4 bands like this. Don't worry about these controls at the bottom, we'll get to that in a moment. So for instance, we might want to turn down the bass. If you're hearing too much rumble in your car, let's say, you just take the bass frequencies and drag them down here with the gain. So let's hear it. So I hope you can hear that the bass and the kick seems to go away. The same can be done with each of these bands. If we wanted to boost the very high frequencies, so the noisy, bright frequencies, we can do that with our band 4. We can just turn up the gain here. Let's reset these. The same can be done with many different bands. I hope you can hear how these bands affect the sound of the track. If we were to divide our frequency spectrum into different sections and describe how these sound and what can be done with these, we can also do that. Actually, we have an infographic about this. Let me just pull it up. So these hertz numbers right here, you can easily check these here in the lower left corner. You have, for example, 20 hertz right here and 120 hertz somewhere around here. And these are also marked. Here you can see 100 hertz, 1000 hertz and 10,000 hertz. Right here with these lines. We can divide sort of the frequency spectrum. So the bass usually we call the low end, and also the mid frequencies can be divided into low and high mids as well. And then we have a high end. Right, so the fundamental of the kick and the fundamental of the bass might sit somewhere in the low end section. Then we have the low mids, where we have the body of the snare, for example, or the higher frequencies of the kick drum. Then we have the presence, where we have many different sounds. We have the body of drum sounds, we have the vocals. A lot of stuff happens in this section because, as you can see, it's between 500 Hertz and 8000 Hertz. So it's a huge space. And then we have the air region, which is above 8000 Hertz. And that's what sounds really noisy, bright, and airy. So for example, the S sounds or inhales and exhales of your vocal, this might sit very much in the high end of the frequency range. So feel free to screenshot this, of course, and we also have a download of this in a better resolution in our freebies section. Let's get back to Ableton and let's just discuss different types of curves that we can use in EQ. And let's get started with the most common curve, which is in fact not what we used before, but this curve. It's called a low pass. Sometimes it's also called a high cut. Why the naming? Because basically we are cutting the frequencies above our band. So this band sits somewhere around 500 Hertz right here. This also might be called a cutoff. For example, in synthesizers, basically everything above the cutoff is cut off, and everything below the cutoff, we are leaving it as it is. So let's just give that a quick listen. So I hope you can hear. The higher we go, the more high frequencies we have. The lower we go, we're basically just left with the bass frequencies. That is the low pass. And why is the low pass used so frequently? In music production, we often end up with harmonically rich sounds, and it's a very common technique of limiting these high frequencies on these sounds just by using a low pass filter. And you can also automate these kind of low pass filters, and these low pass curves are also very common in DJing. Let's say you wanted to say something to the crowd through the music, you might just go down with the cutoff. And now your voice is much more audible in comparison to this, which wouldn't be as clear. These are just a few use cases of the low pass curve. Now let's take a look at the reverse. We also have the high pass curve. So here we are just leaving the highs and cutting the lows. This could be also called a low cut. Okay, so let's test how this sounds. So as you could hear, we already created a sort of transition effect, a DJ style transition effect. This is also very often used by DJs. So for instance, if we were mixing, you might want to just increase a low cut like this, and then take another track, add a high cut like this, and mix the other track in this way. So there are two different types of low pass and high pass curves. For instance, let's just stick with low pass. We have a 12 dB per octave curve, and we also have a 48 dB per octave curve. So you can switch between them right here. And just the difference is that the 48 dB curve, you can see it, it's got a 4x right next to the curve. It's just much steeper. So you can see that we are letting through more frequencies above the cutoff with the 12 dB per octave curve. So the smoother one, and the steeper one, the 48 dB per octave curve, cuts off pretty much everything above it. So the same applies to high pass. We get many more frequencies below the cutoff when we have less of a steep curve. So these are the differences between the two different types. And we also have something called a Q. Sometimes it's also called a resonance in synthesizers, for example. So by default, it's set somewhere around here. but we can raise that to sort of raise the frequencies around our cutoff, or we can reduce that to smooth out the curve. So let's hear what the difference is. Whenever we go above 1 with the Q, we get a lot of that resonance. And when we go below 1, we just smoothen this whole curve. So the same exact thing can be done with the high pass. We have already 4 types of curves covered. Let's take a look at the other 4. So first of all, let's take a look at this one. And this one is called a bell. And why is it a bell? Simply because you can shape it sort of like a bell. So in the bell, you not only have the Q, but you also have the gain. So the gain allows you to boost or cut certain frequencies. And I think you get the idea. You basically can choose a frequency range, boost them or cut them, but then you can also specify how wide this bell curve is supposed to be. And this is done with the Q. So if we go higher, we are just boosting a single frequency. And if we go wide, we can boost a whole range of frequencies. There is a sort of variation of the bell curve as well, because whereas you could cut out a frequency like this, it would be much more efficient if we could go even lower here and not only reduce this frequency, but cut it out completely. And this can be done with the notch curve right here. Here we specify with the Q also how wide this is going to be, but this cuts out a certain frequency completely. It's that simple, and we'll take a look at a practical example of this later on. So we just have 2 more curves left. We have the high shelf, and we've been using that at the beginning, and basically a high shelf boosts all frequencies to the right, so all higher frequencies like this. So for instance, if we wanted to just boost the high end, we might want to do this or cut it. And a similar logic applies to the low shelf. So if we want to boost the bass or cut it, it's quite similar. Now the steepness of this curve can be determined with the Q. So these are the different curves you can find in EQ8. We also have cool infographics on all of these filter types. So this would be our high and low pass. This would be our bell filter. So we can either cut something or boost something. We have our shelves. So we have a high shelf right here and a low shelf. And we have our notch filters. So we're just cutting out some frequencies right here and right here. You can find all of this in a nice infographic, which is also available in our freebies section. And the link to the freebies section you can find in the description. All right, so now that we have the basics, we can fold this and take a look at some practical examples. So here we have 2 synths. So we have a pad. And we also have a plug sound. And let's play these 2 sounds together. So my issue here would be that we can't hear the plug very clearly because the pad is taking up a lot of space in this mix. So let's take a look at the plug itself. Let's open up the EQ and see where majority of this sound lies. So the fundamental frequency and all of the most audible frequencies are somewhere around this area, so we have 300 Hertz. So what we could do, let's just copy by Control or Command and X, paste this EQ onto the wavetable track, onto the pad, and just Control or Command and V, and maybe we can cut these frequencies out from this pad. And let's test what this sounds like with the plug. And let's go back. We can even lower the Q here. Now it's much clearer and we can definitely hear the plug much better. All right, so that's just one simple use case. Let's take a look at another track, just warning, it's pretty noisy. You can definitely hear that we have a very bright, harsh, high frequency that's really unpleasant to hear. Let's try to find it actually. I'm going to enable a bell curve and search for this frequency. So we can see a couple of these. Here's one definitely around 5 kHz. Another one around 10 kHz. Might be also a few here around 15 kHz. So we have a few options. We could either cut this entire section, but this leaves us without all these higher frequencies. So we could even do something a bit more surgical. Let's take this one. Let's go to 5000 Hertz, so 5 kHz. I hope you can hear that we are now cutting out this resonant frequency. Let's take another notch curve, go to 10,000 Hertz, maybe decrease the Q. We can repeat this process if we want to get really surgical and do something like this. And do another one because I can see that we have another harsh frequency somewhere really high. All right, so now let's do an A/B test. Basically, we can disable the effect, listen before and after. Yeah, and if this sound isn't that pleasant, maybe we can throw a high shelf and maybe lower the high frequencies of this sound overall. So we can see that all the other curves now respond to it. So before. And I think we've cleaned up this sound nicely. We could now freeze and flatten this track and use this in a sampler as a sort of synth. We can take a look at another track. We have some vocals loaded up here. Let's just listen to them, maybe just with this reverb. We have just this exhale sound. And also this vocal line.
We dance the night away 'cause it's time to lose our minds.
And what if we wanted to control the airy quality of these vocals? Let's take a look at the exhale first. So we can take a high shelf. Maybe we can boost the high end. So if we wanted this to be much brighter, we could stick with something like this. Let's take a look at the vocal line.
We dance the night away 'cause it's time to lose our minds. Just close your eyes and get lost.
if we boost the high frequencies, usually this sound is going to be much more present, but it's all about balance, and obviously you need to use this in moderation. A cool effect, for instance, if we did a crazy edit like this, could be to use the scale. So this cool control allows us to reduce our changes if we made them too apparent. So let's say we went overboard and just destroyed this vocal like this.
We dance the night away 'cause
we can reduce the scale just to make this change really subtle.
we dance the night away 'cause
I really like the scale, and make sure to use your ears instead of just relying on the visual aids here. All right, so let's take another example for today. We have this kick drum, then we have a bass sound, sounds like this. But if we really listen closely, the kick is clashing with our bass. There's an easy fix here, which involves either adding a sidechain compressor, which is going to duck the bass whenever the kick hits, or we can use EQ. We can use a dynamic equalization technique, so that we only reduce the bass on the first hit whenever the kick hits, but then the other bassline notes are unchanged. So what we have set up here is an envelope follower, which just follows the gain of the kick. And this one is mapped to the EQ8 and to the low shelf of just band 1. And this is what it looks like. So every time the kick hits, we are going from 50%, so nothing, gain unchanged, to 0, which is basically taking the gain all the way down. So let's listen to that now. And that's much clearer, and we can still hear the first bass note, at least the higher frequencies, which don't clash with our kick. All right, as promised, here are a few nice, a bit more advanced features of EQ8. Let's say we want to have a notch curve and we are just cutting out from this track this frequency. If you wanted to now preview the frequencies that we are cutting, you can just turn on these headphones, and if we click on our band, we're gonna hear the opposite. So we'll hear exactly what we're cutting. The same applies to, for example, shelves. So if we try to cut the bass, this is what we're cutting. And the same applies to all of the other curves. You can disable the frequency spectrum. There are a few modes, a very important feature actually, really often used. You can just process the stereo signal as we've done. You can process the left signal separately. For instance, if you wanted to add more stereo width, you could process your left and right channels differently. We have mid-side mode. Basically, mid is all of the signal that's mono, and the sides are basically all of the signal that is stereo and has some difference between the left and right channel. For instance, if we have a kick drum, it's typically going to be completely mono, and if we have a lush pad or just a huge sound, it's typically going to be stereo. All the reverbs are usually stereo. So if we wanted to, for instance, make sure that our kick is fully mono, we could cut the side signal. This is sometimes done on the master track. We could boost the high frequencies of the sides, for instance, to sort of raise the stereo image. So that's something that could be done in the mid-side mode. Now, another feature is this adaptive cue button. So this just changes how the Q settings behave. If it's enabled, it sort of mimics analog EQ behavior. And basically you end up with a more consistent output volume than you were just without it on. We also have just a simple gain, which raises the volume of the overall signal. All right, I hope you found this video on basics of equalization useful. Make sure to check out our Music Production Academy with lots of start to finish courses on making tracks in various genres. And if you'd like to learn Ableton 12 with all the foundations of music production, check out the Beginner to Advanced Live 12 Start to Finish course. Make sure to also see the Everything Bundle Collector's Edition, which includes all of the courses, sound packs and project files in our store. Links to all of that are in the video description. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. If you enjoyed this video, leave it a like, write us a comment, and I will see you in the next ones.